Hey guys, Kyle here. So, just before the show starts, I wanted to mention our Patreon. You can pay us $1 a month as a thank you, as a tip. You can pay $2 a month to get access to one of our bonus content shows, episodes 2 days early, and a secret Discord chat where all of our Patreon donors get to go and hang out and talk with us directly. Then there's a $5 tier that you can donate to get access to a whole bunch more content. We have multiple bonus episodes on there. So please check it out. Patreon.com/itgetsweird. We don't advertise, we don't make money. So check it out and throw some money if you think that would be cool. Thanks.
Welcome to It Gets Weird, our comedy show where we explore the unusual, the unbelievable, and the unexplained to try to make your world a little weirder. I'm Nile.
And I'm Kyle, and I'd like to kick this one off with an apology.
Okay.
Maybe it should be a general apology, to
just like a go out to everybody kind of thing.
Apology, yeah. But it was over a specific thing, and I'm gonna get it out of the way right now before I forget. In our last episode, I talked about Mushi. So people in our Discord pointed out, and I Googled it and confirmed. I actually make a point to say that I have not Googled this, so I don't know what I'm talking about. So I guess that saves me a little bit.
The podcaster's defense.
Right. I said that the Japanese greeting for picking up the phone is mushi mushi, which would be like picking up the phone and saying bug bug. And I should have known that was not right and that I was mishearing things. And I do think that I was told that it was mushi when I was much younger. And I just misremembered things. So first of all, it's moshi moshi. And I led you wrong, Nile, and I led the listeners wrong. And I want to apologize up front because that was like somebody who took 4 years of Japanese in high school and has watched anime their entire life. That is just unacceptable, And so I'm sorry. Okay.
Yeah, well, it's good that you got that out here. It's good that you're meeting it at its head and you're taking care of the apology as quickly as possible. So hopefully the world will forgive you for your crimes.
Yes.
I'm
going to grow and learn. Okay. And this is just a first step. So, now we do have an email. Do you want to hear the email before we, get
I'm hungry. I haven't had fucking dinner yet. This is a shoot. I have not had dinner yet while we're recording this podcast. So I am hungry.
All right.
And so I'm ready for an email.
Well, open up the mouth because here comes the airplane. I'm going to just aim the spoonful of email directly in your mouth. Here's what it says. This is an email from Sid. And the subject line says, not Jacob. So first of all, this is another
not that we're
response.
Against Jacob, but it is in response to a bit from the podcast. So
yes, so we're getting in the non-Jacob emails, which is nice. So Sid says, as promised in the subject line, I'm not Jacob, so here's your DEI for the week. I am in fact Sid. The podcast is a highlight of my week, and I'm always excited to see the subject matter do what's French for week. But I just wanted to say that this week particularly tickled a place in my brain that I haven't visited in a long time. So this is about the Harikiki Gaki Mushi, I think. I didn't read the email, by the way, before I started reading it here live, as I'm wont to do. So let's see what this says.
All right.
When I was about 5 years old, I got this weird and fanciful notion that there was a mouse living in my abdomen like one of those children's books that has a small creature living in a hollow in a tree and sipping tea out of an acorn while curled up in an armchair in front of a fireplace, wearing a nightcap with a pom-pom at the end and reading a book. Like a less sinister version of the Celestial Seasonings bear. Now, It's interesting. This is somebody who knows about the dark secrets behind the celestial seasonings, company.
Yeah, they're enlightened. Yeah.
They know what's up. I will say on its surface, the celestial seasonings bear is kind of like in line with what you described, but I understand what you're saying. But your layman will be like, "No, I love the celestial seasonings
Yeah,
bear.
what's
What are you talking
sinister about that little bear?
What's
It's
wrong
so
with
cute.
that?" So,
Oh, if you only knew.
so they go on and say, of course, I didn't really believe this, but I did spend an inordinate amount of time bent over padded easy chair arms, putting pressure on my rib cage in an effort to suffocate the mouse before I myself passed out. Wow, that wouldn't. I don't know. First of all, I don't know if that would suffocate a mouse in your abdomen. I think mostly that would like get you to fart a bunch. Is my guess.
Did you ever consider swallowing a cat?
Oh, that's a good.
I've heard anecdotal evidence that can work, although I didn't finish the whole song / book that I was reading.
Yeah, no, that's a good idea. I think that's I can follow the logic of that. And yeah, the cat's going to get in there. It's going to get your mouse. The thing that I would say about that, Nile, is then you're going to need a larger predator to take care of the cat.
No, look, we're trying to deal with a mouse problem here. I don't know about what you're talking about with these larger predators. We're trying to deal with a mouse. And I think that the cat is the best way to do this.
Okay. All right. Noted. Now they go on and say, so maybe as a child, I subconsciously understood the idea of a harakikigaki mushi, and I knew that mouse was going to tell all my dirty childhood secrets to the gods if I didn't stop it, and since I wasn't allowed to stay up late, I'd have to suffocate the bastard. Or maybe the time I spent trying to murder an imaginary mouse in my abdomen left my brain bereft of oxygen during a pivotal period in my development. Who could say? I promise that I'm a productive and decent member of society as an adult. But
hell yeah.
I really like that sequence of things.
The image of a small child going up to their parents and saying, "I know the secret of the Harakakagichi Mushi," is like one of the funniest things I've thought about. Like this child who's just been draped over the padded edge of a chair for like an hour, comes
probably
up to you
farting.
and says, "I understand the secret."
Yeah.
Like
I know the secrets of the Harikikigaki.
There you go.
And I'm ready.
Like, what would you do as a parent?
Kids say a lot of shit, man. You just have to assume that they made a word up.
Yeah.
But if you knew what the Harakikigaki Mushi were, then then you'd maybe have to start reconsidering what you know about reality.
Yeah, Look, this isn't quite reaching this level of thing, but it's a thing that I think is kind of funny, and I want to bring it into the lore of the podcast. There are certain situations it came across when Jules and I were rewatching 28 Days Later, where we just turned to each other at one point, and she said to me, what would you even do in this situation? And I just, without missing a beat, just said, I would shit my pants and die. Yeah. And I think like my kid, my like young child that is not as far as I can tell has never studied Japanese or Japanese folklore, coming up to me and saying those words to me in a deadpan wouldn't quite get me to a shit your pants and die situation, because I do have a child, but it would be nearing that level of perplexing. Yeah.
I mean, there's the oh my god, this is such a fucking detour, and there's a little bit left in the email, but
I interrupt you before you even finish the email.
Oh no, hey, look, it's all good. I mean, this is the opening banter. This is what it's all about. But I've read some things, and I've tried to pull it into a like cohesive episode before, but haven't quite gotten there. Of supposed proof of like past lives and stuff like that.
I've also tried to do an episode on that.
Yeah, which I'm sure there's a way to do it. But one of the things I remember reading is there is this like, it's like, well, one of the proofs is that like, oh, this kid one time spoke perfect French, even though they were, a different they lived in the United States or whatever, and this toddler spoke perfect French or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I have no idea if that's true. I just remember seeing that when I was looking that stuff up. So,
Yeah. It's like those things where it's like, oh, I was either abducted by aliens or I died and then come back knowing an entirely new language thing is one of those fun things you'll come across in research.
And now we can add my toddler spoke of the procedures to help cure the harakikigaki mushi in my liver using acupuncture and herbal medicine. And if your child does that, then there might be a past life that they're sort of, remembering from the 12th century Japan. So who knows? Anyways, this email says, I'm a productive and decent member of society as an adult, but thanks for unexpectedly taking me down a truly terrifying and dark memory lane of childhood imagination. Hey, that's what we're here for. This is a secret that I've never shared with anyone, but I trust it is safe in your hands and the hands of your weird nicks should you choose to read this email to my fellow listeners. Faithfully yours and fuck that mouse, Sid. P.S. We have a big question proposal about cryptids. Shit, we gotta have a
we gotta start keeping these because there was.
I'll put a list together.
Look, here's the thing: we are saving user submitted big questions to be used at a later date. So if you send it in and don't hear it immediately, don't worry. We are holding them.
So yeah, it says PS. There's a big question about cryptids, and then PPS made you say PP, which I liked.
There you go.
So thank you, Sid. That was a good email.
Very good email. I didn't have that specifically, but I think there were times where I had little weird feelings of my body being mechanical in a weird way. There were times where I felt like there was weird shit going on in my body growing up that probably would sound wild if I were to try to articulate it these days.
Yeah, I do. I'm sure I had something like that before, but it was not a mouse living in my. I can tell you a fear I had that, actually, maybe I don't want to say this because it would freak Nile out really badly.
Oh, yeah. Well, I think I can guess the gist of that one.
I had a fear involving certain insects and things being able to get inside my body. That was always a scary one to me.
Okay, so that just stirred a memory in me. Did you ever get freaked out by the episode of Rugrats where they swallowed a seed from a watermelon and a watermelon grew inside of them?
Yeah, when I was really little, it was like that and swallowing gum. It was you basically killed yourself.
Yeah.
You're basically the Walking Dead at this point. So I definitely had those. But I think what this is more indicative of is sort of a high anxiety childhood, not so much I don't know, a fantasy about a mouse. But yeah, I had that as well. I was scared to swallow watermelon seeds, scared to swallow gum, and was afraid that bugs were crawling inside of my head. So,
there you go. I don't know. I don't really have a good transition because we're not talking about
well, sometimes you got a hard cut,
So Kyle, today I want to talk about Danny the poltergeist, or also known as Danny's bed.
Okay.
Have you ever heard of this poltergeist story? Savannah, Georgia, 1998.
Shit. I don't. Maybe it's possible. I mean, there's a lot of. Here's the thing. When you start reading about poltergeists, the stories all kind of start to blend together,
In some ways, this one has some shit about it that I think is interesting. But you're not wrong. This has a lot of the hallmarks, and we'll get into that. And then, but it also this one goes in some fucking weird places. The reason I ask about if you'd heard of it is not only because we do this podcast, but because the most common place you'll see this story put out on the internet, a place that you'll find a version of it written over and over again, a lot of times the same version, is this thing that goes around like every paranormal website, every like weird stuff website has for some reason this thing that's like the 3 most famous poltergeist encounters, and it's like the Enfield poltergeist, this one, and one other one, and that same article, almost verbatim, if not verbatim, persists across the entire fucking internet. So that's why I bring it up, because that's where I found it. But then I actually found a PDF copy of the book that the guy who was responsible for all this wrote. So
responsible or involved?
Involved. So this deals with the haunting of this bed for a man's child. The man's name is Al Cobb, and he's kind of he wrote the book. He bought the bed. He wrote the book. He did all that stuff. So
because when you say responsible, it's like, take off the hood and, it's me, Austin.
Yeah,
the poltergeist was me all along.
Look, not to prejudice someone against this guy before we get started, but he does have like 3 other books about ghost hauntings in this area. He he drives the motor of a lot of this story in a way that you could, but I don't think he didn't like do it to somebody else. It's all
okay.
Like his family.
That's funny because he didn't do it to anybody, anybody else. He just did it to his family, probably.
It was a family business, effectively. Here.
No, it's kind of funny because now that you're saying it, I realize the like important thing in a haunting of this nature, where like there is a family that's like afflicted by spirits or poltergeists or whatever. Usually the way that this pans out is you have to narrow it down to, as you said it, the person who is the engine behind the thing.
Mm-hmm.
For some reason, it's giving Jeff the talking mongoose, which you weren't there for that episode, but
no.
That was forever ago. I had Jules on, and basically it was like there's all these stories surrounding this entity that was like basically a talking mongoose, ghost demon thingy.
Mm-hmm.
But the more you would learn about it, the more you would realize that like the sort of engine that the phenomena revolved around was the daughter of the house.
Yeah.
So
it's this. Okay. We'll just launch into this because it's somewhat involved. I went pretty deep because I was able to like go straight to the fucking book itself. So I have the story as chronicled by the people who witnessed it and everything direct from the horse's mouth, which is fun. That's cool. And then I also have like other stuff surrounding it. So the basic gist, let's start there.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to travel back to 1998 in Savannah, Georgia, where we're going to meet our family here named the Cobbs. You have the husband is Al, his wife is Lila, Lila, and then they have 2 sons, Jason and where's the other one? His name. Jason is kind of our main boy, and then Lee is his twin brother who it will be around, but Jason is the main boy. And it all revolves around when Al Cobb brings home this new bed that he bought at an antique selling thing. Like he basically, I don't know what his actual job was, but in the book, the only real like job that he talks about a lot is like buying and selling antiques and stuff. He seems to go and frequent estate sales, yard sales, antique stuff, and traffic in antiques.
Interesting. So that's a good way to get haunted, right? Like if you believe
Kyle,
in that
you
stuff,
have no idea. You have no idea. This guy is, like I said, we'll get into it, but he is the engine by which all of these hauntings happen.
Sure. Now, do you think it would be like See, imagine if like you were reading a story about a poltergeist or whatever, and you're uncovering details about the family,
Mhm.
and they were like, "Yeah, so Mrs. Smith was an accountant. The children were going to elementary school.
Yeah.
Mr. Smith was a professional noisemaker and voice thrower and
Yeah.
table thumper
Magician. Yeah.
and magician." Like that one would be a fucking layup, but like there is something almost like a built-in I don't know, like I don't know if explanation is the right word, but there's already a built-in route to getting haunted by being an antique collector or
Mhm.
whatever, so
Yeah, I think like whenever you're dealing with a case of like a bunch of hauntings in one place, if one of the people involved in that, like you can use the phrase trafficked in antiquities, then you kind of know your culprit, you know?
yeah, definitely.
So this all really starts at the end of 1998. I think in like around Christmas time, around like in November. Um, he buys this antique bed for one of his twin sons as a present. It was in the style of the late 1800s, and his son Jason liked the present very much. They set it up in his bedroom, and he was very happy. They placed it against this wall, and 3 days later, after he had set up the bed and slept in it for just a couple days, he told his parents that he felt this invisible presence kind of lurking over him as he was sleeping. He said it was as if someone was lying right next to him and like laying on their one elbow,
Mhm.
like propping their head on their elbow,
Right.
and would just be like staring at him, um, watching him sleep. He said he also could at times feel a cold breath on the side of his neck. Uh, Initially, they think Jason is just kind of, imagining things, acting up, doing something like that. So the parents just kind of ignored it. However, the next morning, when Jason woke up, he found that the picture frame of his dead grandparents that he had kind of sitting on I think like a table by his bedside was now laying face down.
Now,
Um,
ghosts have this tendency
mhm.
to sit bedside and watch you or whatever, or like sit on the bed. What and I've seen that in many stories. Do you think it's just that they're just like, God, when I was alive, sleeping, I miss that. That was the shit. That was the
Yeah,
good shit. Like, not a lot of good things in life. Sleeping was pretty good though.
yeah, like there is a lot of sleeping, like things happening while you were sleeping in ghost stories. So like I don't know, is there some want from the dead to be able to sleep now that they're beyond the realm of the living, or is it like,
It'd be restful, and that's sort of like the
yeah, I
idea
guess,
with spirits that are wandering the earth still is they don't get to rest, right?
yeah.
That's the classic thing, at least.
This one specifically seems to be that Danny as a spirit was originally attached to this bed.
Hmm.
So there's a little bit of a different vibe there, but largely I don't know what it is. You might be right with the whole like lack of sleep thing. But like we talk about, like poltergeists generally are linked to something, right? Like they're linked to an object or a person or whatever.
Yeah.
Um, and initially here, I say initially because it will change eventually, which is I think a bit unusual for poltergeist cases, as far as I can tell. The bed stops being needed at some point, but to start off, the bed is kind of the anchor. Um, so yeah, his parents ignore him initially. He wakes up. This portrait is moved, or this picture is flipped face down, and he fixes it, places it back up right, and then goes on about his day. The next morning, same thing happens. Picture is face down. This goes on for another 3 days in total before he starts to kind of think something is going on, because I think on the fourth morning he wakes up and the picture is now surrounded by various items from around the room, in kind of a circular shape around this picture frame that is laying face down. There is a conch shell, a dinosaur that was made from a series of shells for some reason, a plaster cast of a bird, and two different beanie babies. So these things had been they were not like together around the room. They were scattered across the room. And now when he woke up, they were surrounding circle around this picture that has been fucked with.
This entity is sounding very positive to me now. It's saying like, sell the Beanie Babies now before the market dies. Get them out.
Trying to warn them about the impending Beanie Baby crash. Yeah. 1998. Yeah, they're not that far off.
Do people know about that?
I think
do Beanie
probably
Babies
made
exist?
A movie about it in the last 2 years.
Oh, right. And it was directed by Jerry Seinfeld. And
if they haven't made that one already, I know they made a documentary a couple years ago, but that doesn't mean everybody knows about it. Once they make the movie, it will be,
Are you gonna go see the Pop-Tart movie or whatever?
No.
Oh, okay. I don't know. I'm just asking. Did you ever see the photo of the husband and wife splitting up the Beanie Baby collection
in the
divorce proceedings,
sitting on the floor,
something else,
sitting on their knees in
so
dressed
good.
for the court on the courtroom floor, dividing up the piles of Beanie Babies. It is one of the greatest images ever captured by humankind.
I love it.
Yeah.
So this poltergeist was sort of just this to me is a symbol, a sign to sell.
I think that's a good reading of it, honestly. They really should have listened to him and sold off all that fucking Beanie Baby stuff at this point. So at this point, it's been going on long enough that Al decides that he needs to kind of investigate, do a little thing. He supposedly says, "Do we have a Casper?" Before starting to try to interrogate the ghost.
A Casper, as in he's referring to the spirit as a Casper?
Correct. Do we have a
friendly ghost,
quote friendly ghost in the house?
Okay.
So after a couple minutes passed with no talking response, he's just basically asking questions to the room, looking for this spirit to answer. And he doesn't have any luck with that, so he decides to do something else. He grabs some paper, a few crayons, and leaves them on the bed. He then asked the same questions and then left the room for approximately 15 minutes. And when they returned, on the paper was written Danny and 7. So they basically were told that they have a spirit named Danny who was 7 years old.
Okay. Now, it's the thing that I would say about that is it seems almost too perfect that this guy would think, if I'm going to communicate with a spirit, I need to leave out crayons. And then the 7-year-old Danny spirit is the utensil I remember so well from my living life.
Which that is a totally reasonable thing to think, but we'll find out that I believe Danny existed before the advent of the crayon.
Oh, okay. All right.
So
maybe crayons are way older than you think, Nile.
Maybe.
I'm going to Google that at some point during this episode.
Yeah, because we're about to get to, because they basically, now that they had a name and an age, they started to kind of develop the identity of Danny the spirit. They started to try to communicate with Danny quite a bit, and found out that writing was seemingly the best way to do this. They, over the next couple sessions, found out that Danny, his mother had died in 1890 in the same bed that Jason was now trying to use. So this was Danny's mom's bed that he is now linked to, and he doesn't want. Basically, he really doesn't want people sleeping on his mother's bed, basically.
That's fair.
And would kind of they also find out that he died of possibly yellow fever at the age of 7, and lived he died in 1899. So that's how old we're talking in terms of the ghost. He's 100-year-old ghost at this point.
Okay. Now, would you like to know when crayons were a thing?
I would love to know when we first got crayons.
So it's apparently not 100% clear when it first came about.
Okay.
But the earliest sort of thing that's crayon came around 16th century. and then actual like crayons came in like mid 19th century. Like
Okay.
basically, what I'm saying is this Danny could have had a
Danny could have
fondness
had
for
crayons.
crayons.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that turns out crayons are way older than I thought they were.
It's stuff
I
like
guess
that
it's
always
just colored
is.
wax. Like I guess that makes sense.
It's wax with pigments. Yeah.
So anyway, so Danny has now said, "Hey, please don't sleep on my mommy's deathbed." And at this point, they basically are like, okay, so Danny has this bed, and we don't want to like anger him, so they move Jason into his brother's Lee's room, and they leave it alone. This is kind of the status quo for a little bit as they start to learn more about Danny and try to like learn how to talk to him more. And a lot of the places will just say communication continued.
Mhm.
But what they leave out is the level to which this communication takes. Because like I read the book, like not the entire book, but a very like a lot of chunks of it, finding the parts that were really vague in different reportings. And Danny basically became their third son. Like,
sure. As one does. I mean, if you get a 7-year-old ghost from the late 19th century, you're adopting him. Like, that's just how it works.
Here's just some various things that they talk about over the course of this book that they do with Danny in this time period. Danny would write notes about how he like that he was going to stay in today and play with toys or like go out or whatever. Like he would hang out in the attic playing with toys a lot. Danny actually at some point was able to talk to some of the deceased relatives of the Cobb family. And after doing this, was able to correctly identify from a stack of approximately 30 or so mixing bowls, a bowl that Al's wife had inherited from her grandmother, and took the time to actually write like, where is it? Your mom's bowl, Leela, with an arrow pointing to the bowl. And this led to Al talking about how doing this kind of interaction with physical objects is really tiring for ghosts, for poltergeists. And after doing this, he then wrote "tired sleep time" and went to go to sleep because he was tired.
Well, that first of all, that fucks up my entire thing earlier about wanting to sleep. Second of all, it also sort of like is weird, like the idea that ghosts would be tired. I just like don't know how you would do that without like a sort of physical body tethering you to sleep. But
the best way I can suss it out from just reading how these things go is like to present physically in some way, there has to be energy, and what you doing things uses up that energy. So once he's used enough energy, he doesn't really like sleep. He just kind of like retreats to a less physical, visible touch with the real world standpoint. And then once he restores the energy enough, he can come back and present again. It's kind of like it's like a fucking cooldown bar in a video game, you know?
Yeah, it's to recharge mana and stuff. See, this though is like we're again at the like crossroads that I'm always curious about with people and ghosts, because what you're describing to me right now is this person has basically decided. Sorry, let me put it this way. The most cynical reading of this, if you don't believe in ghosts, it's like this person has decided this is the lore for how ghosts work, right? Like this is how ghosts work. They're like energetic projections of some kind, or like remnants of energy, and it's like but there's still these like other elements to it that like feel spiritual, you know? It's like to say a ghost is like tired, to me, I'm just like, man, it's like, I don't know, it's a weird tightrope walk, I think.
If you want to talk about how ghosts work, just wait, because there's some stuff that we'll talk about. But like you're right in what you're saying. Like that is actually kind of important to keep in mind for stuff later. That's how is like you're working on this kind of energy thing that you can expend energy and gain energy as a ghost, and that's kind of your life force at any given moment kind of thing. So I also at some point for Halloween, when all the other kids went out trick or treating, I think it was like the niece of Al or something left candy out for Danny, and when they came home, the packages of the candy were opened, and he like was happy, you know, like they literally detail involving Danny the ghost in like family functions and family celebrations and stuff in this book.
So wait, did the ghost eat the candy?
No, it just like
It
played with
opened them
it
up and
was
okay.
happy at being treated like a child, I guess,
like a real not dead child human being. I mean, this is this is a lot, but I'll let you keep going.
Yeah. He would even leave these notes that would like cause kind of little like fights in the family. Like at one point, Al recounts a time when Danny basically ratted out his brother Lee for smoking, and he wrote, "Lee, stop, please," while his parents were yelling at Lee about smoking because like they had family that died of lung cancer. And like they would play like tic-tac-toe with the ghost, and the ghost would like Danny would like cheat at tic-tac-toe by like ghostly filling in a bunch of the grid with O's and then saying haha beat you and stuff. He even like for Al's birthday colored in a coloring book for him with this like happy bear picture and signed it. So you can find I have captures of a lot of these some of these things that I'm describing here, including the coloring of one Danny the ghost, that I can send you after this.
Okay, this is here's who is this for? Like, is this to sell a book or something or is it that there's something that you will run into with this stuff is like you think that maybe on some level people will choose to believe that this is really what's happening, because you know they have a weird relationship to death.
I didn't find a lot on Al Cobb outside of these things, so I don't know him as a larger man, you know, like I don't know the larger context of
well, his size doesn't really play into this. I'm just asking.
It's like I don't know if he fears death or if like all I can say is that he wrote multiple books about ghosts in the Savannah, Georgia area, and after the events of this book, Danny's Bed, happened, he did go on a couple he was on a Fox reality show thing, interviewed about ghost encounters. He was on, like, he did a couple of the things that you do when you have a buzzy,
if you want to make money off of your popular ghost story, right? Okay.
Yeah. So I don't think he's like still out there fucking like, you know, making a bunch of money off of this, because but you can buy his book for like $5 on Abe Books and shit. So it's not like a incredibly sought after text. Anyway, so, you know, after like ratting out his brother and stuff and cheating at games, like all the little kid shit he does, after a time, Jason's ability seemed to kind of grow because he started to be able to actually physically see Danny's apparition. And going forward, he becomes kind of the conduit for information about the various spirits, because they don't just deal with Danny, Kyle. We're about to get into what I have marked as continued poltergeist activity, because we got some new fucking entries coming into this realm.
Now, here's another thing that I would like to point out is that poltergeist activity typically doesn't involve an apparition. That's not 100% true, but it's like most of the time a poltergeist is like phenomena, usually kind of violent, surrounding a potentially haunted object or place. And stuff will be moved around spontaneously. Things will be thrown, knocking, things like that. But it usually doesn't culminate in the appearance of an apparition. It depends on the story, right? But like when I think of like classic poltergeist, it's usually some like unseen force moving things and making noises in a house.
Yeah.
So,
and that's like that the why this story has so much visible shit will tie into the kind of culmination of all of this, I think. In terms of like what theory they're pushing, but we will get there for sure. The inciting incident that kind of propels this into the next direction, into the next stage of ghost activity, is also the thing that leads to them getting rid of the bed, and that is an incident involving the bed with Jason, Al, and I think his wife's in there too. Like most of the families are involved in this. So Jason has been moved out of his room for a while and has been staying with his brother Lee. And as far as I can tell from the book, this is a thing that this context of it is something that is not really represented in a lot of the online versions. But in the book, it's basically posited as the quote real kids, Jason and Lee, started to get kind of jealous about how much Daddy and Mommy were paying attention to Danny. And it led to them kind of pushing back a little bit. So Jason, one time when they were in the room checking on like doing the normal like checking on Danny shit, Jason started to like as kind of like a way to poke his ghost brother's buttons, I guess, starts to like kind of fall onto the bed, and he would kind of like start to get up and then fall back and like kind of do the thing where he's like, oh, I'm getting up, doing that like kid thing. And this seems to really make Danny upset because Danny then takes this wall hanging made out of terracotta that's on the wall across the bed and fucking just wings it at Jason's head. And it misses him by like an inch and crashes on the wall behind him. And this, of course, freaks everybody out and they leave. Now, that's one version of the story. There is a separate version that you'll see more. And why I'm including both these, I'll tell you where they come from in a second. But the other version of the story is that one night Jason alone was going to go to bed, and he decided to go into Danny's bed basically and tell him, "Hey, Danny, this is my bed now. I have to use it." And at that point, he rolled over and saw this terracotta head that had been hanging on the wall, hovering in the air in front of him. And he recognizes it, and then it gets thrown at his face, basically. Jason then ducks and ran to go get his parents. And then a couple minutes later, when they returned to the room, Danny had entirely trashed the bedroom. Lamps were knocked over, curtains were torn down. Basically, they had pissed off Danny. Now, that version that I just said appears in the article that kind of launched all of this stuff, which was a 1998 article in a local paper in Savannah, Georgia, by a journalist named Jane Fishman. She wrote kind of a small series of articles that are actually reproduced in Al's book, which is weird because they kind of contradict some details of his story. Because the version that I told you first came directly from Danny's book, from Al's book, Danny's Bed. So I don't know what to do with these stories being like the main impulse is the same. He went back onto the bed after he had stopped sleeping on it for a while. Danny didn't like it and threw a terracotta thing at the boy's head. And this led to them kind of getting rid of the bed and things progressing. But the details are different.
Details. I mean, do you think maybe like do they at any point have anything to say about the difference in details, or
no?
They literally just lay the article in there side by side with.
They're just in the book.
Okay,
they are so I don't know what to do with that. Like, I don't know if there was another incident where Jason was alone and something happened, or if the story just changed over time. And because the reason, I don't know if I've said this, but it's worth reiterating at this point. Jane Fishman's article happened basically right when the events of the article took place in 1998. It was published basically immediately. And then the book didn't come out until 2007. And there are things in the book that make me think that he wanted you to kind of think that it came out before then. because the forward that Al wrote was dated as 1999.
Okay.
And
I mean, is it possible he was working on it back then and just never got it published?
Well,
or?
A lot of these things are based on the journals that he was keeping. So supposedly he was journaling this all as it happened. So the forward could have been part of those journals, or could have been when he had the idea for the book and just whatever happened. But there is this kind of disparity between the initial telling of things in 98 and 99, and then the kind of definitive accounting in the book from 2007, that I think is just like worth pointing out.
Yeah, I feel like this is not the first time we've run into this, where you kind of get this sense of like, did you maybe write this later than you claim? That I feel like that's come up before.
Because this is basically where a lot of this stuff, the initial reporting, would end. Like, they sell the bed, there's some continued stuff, there's these vague notions of these other ghosts a little bit, some funny stories about them, but like the detail stops there. And then when you go in the book, it definitely does not. Basically everything picks up after this. And this is straight from Al himself. He said, soon the good china was in cahoots with the dining room table, and the table would set itself over and over. Service for 6, thank you. All the pictures in the house would often be turned at right angles. Light bulbs in the dining room chandelier unscrewed themselves, and the chandelier would swing by itself. There was a happy face made from oranges and bananas on the kitchen floor. The stopper in the kitchen sink developed a mind of its own and kept popping out of the sink drain, landing on the floor. Doors open and closed right in front of the family members. When the family tried to videotape some of this, the camera would shut itself off. So a lot of this stuff just this is when you start to get just a lot of your traditional poltergeist phenomena. Electricity stuff, light bulbs, objects flying around, being moved, shifted, all that kind of
Classic.
stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. It just really picks up. But they also get some investigation going on here. Andrew Nichols, the head of the parapsychology research unit in Florida, did some stuff here, as well as another parapsychologist, William Roll. They actually investigated, and they filmed some of it for a show called 48 Hours, which I was unable to find this particular footage. So if anyone has an idea of where I can find old episodes of 48 Hours about, like, from 1998 or 2000, let me know. However, the camera setup didn't find any paranormal activity, but they did find some weird electromagnetic readings in Jason's room, specifically on the wall adjacent to his bed. And they came to some conclusions in this that are kind of, and after we talk about these conclusions, we'll get into the fun other ghosts that they talked about. But they basically concluded that the house itself is probably haunted to some degree, but has this high psychic energy from the boy's bed that has kind of activated in him the like latent ability effectively. They think that that this whole thing is because of electromagnetic energy that is gathered at the wall by Danny's bed and by like where Jason was sleeping, and has caused this whole fucking portal of paranormal phenomena to open up based on electromagnetic shit in the wall here.
It's it's the Poltergeist, the movie thing.
Yeah,
it's the same kind of idea, except it's not it's not an Indian burial ground.
Yeah, it's a confluence of items, which we'll find. Don't you worry. There's more haunted items to come.
Oh, thank God.
Because this guy, I guess, like, bought a lot of random shit at yard sales and
I fucking I told you. You go and you get those antiques, you're liable to fucking haunt your shit up.
Yeah. So let's start with Uncle Sam, because that's a fun other ghost that we dealt with. Now, he's called Uncle Sam not because he's specifically dressed like Uncle Sam, but he is dressed in that kind of garb and is a tall, gangly man. Jason supposedly is the only one that ever actually saw Uncle Sam proper, because it happened when he was home alone. And he, as far as I remember, Uncle Sam basically came out of the fireplace dressed in like fucking frontiersman garb and started just
Oh my God.
trashing the house. Like a like 7-foot tall frontiersman that looks like
That's-
Uncle Sam coming out of your fucking like fireplace and just tearing shit up around your
How
house.
would you fucking react to that? It's
Yeah,
like,
we're close to a
holy
shit your
shit.
pants and die situation here.
holy shit, this fucking Civil War guy just came out. Oh, fuck. He's throwing the fucking China around, dude.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know what I would do. I probably
So-
wouldn't shit my pants and die, but I would be like, this is a suboptimal ghost encounter.
Yeah, it's a rough one. So what happens with Uncle Sam is basically, so Jason is home alone. He comes out of the fireplace, is looking at this portrait above the fireplace, and then snaps onto Jason, and I think his dog was there too, and kind of stares menacingly at them. And then he starts to go around the house, seemingly just like tearing stuff up, trying, maybe looking for something. So Jason calls his dad, who he says sets a new land speed record on his way home to try to save his boy, and comes like charging in, and Uncle Sam is nowhere to be found. But things are kind of fucked up, looking like everything's kind of torn up. And so he doesn't tear home originally. He just calls and says, okay, if he comes back, call me again and I'll come home. And then, of course, he comes back, starts tearing stuff up again. And then that's when Al comes speeding home. And he's nowhere to be found. But Jason says, I still feel him in the house. So they like wait a bit, and then he reappears. So Al calls the cops, who then come and yet again don't see anything.
What are
And
the police going to do?
They specifically tell him, basically, you probably shouldn't want to file the report for this, because at best you're going to have a bunch of weirdos knocking down your door trying to ask you about this ghost stuff. But like a couple days later, Uncle Sam then comes back, tears shit up again, before like declaring that his business is basically done and he's finished. And what that business is supposedly Uncle Sam's, in quotes, yet again, not the actual Uncle Sam, but that's what they call it. His daughter, who died, was buried underneath the house that they lived in. And he was trying to find where his daughter was. So once he found his daughter's resting place, his business was done and he left. Now, he supposedly wrote a kind of short synopsis of this on the countertop, basically saying,
fuck?
I was looking for my daughter. I found her, and now we're good. And
Okay.
he says, like,
most people aren't so lucky that their ghosts will just explain their business in writing. That's not typical.
This is the shit that I'm talking about with this, because this is not even the weirdest one that we're going to talk about, because we haven't started talking about Gracie yet. So Uncle Sam writes this on the countertop, and they're like, okay, but like, we don't, so just leave us the note and everything. He fucking like erases the note after leaving magically, and they're like, wait, no, please, can we save the note? So the note reappears, and so you can also see that in his book. Uncle Sam has pretty nice like cursive handwriting, I'll tell you that much. Whereas Danny looks like someone carving with a knife, like that kind of like all straight lines, jagged, like
Red
crossing
rum
lines
type
and stuff.
shit, yeah.
Exactly. So that's the Uncle Sam story. The whole like,
Sure.
oh, can we have the notes, and just like having them reappear thing is fucking wild.
That's
But
amazing.
let's talk about Gracie real quick.
Sure.
So,
Tell me about Gracie. What's this all about?
Gracie, to most people, is a statue in a cemetery called the Bonaventure Cemetery in Savannah, Georgia. It's a very nice marble statue that was carved by a very famous stone worker at the time, memorializing a fallen child who was the daughter of a local hotel owner that was kind of like the big hotel in Savannah at the time. She kind of became the kind of de facto mascot for this hotel. All the guests loved her, all this stuff. Parents loved her. She was like the light of everyone's life. And then she got pneumonia when she was 6 and passed away. So the parents were totally distraught. the town had this like massive fucking funeral for Gracie at the hotel. It was like a big thing. They then had this statue made at her gravesite. So fast forward 100 years, and Al Cobb is at his weekly going to yard sales and shit when he's looking through a stack of cookbooks and sees this random photograph for 10 cents that he just kind of grabs without thinking about it. And he sees that it's a photo from a series of cards called the Bonaventure series at Bonaventure Cemetery, which is pretty close to his home. He doesn't really think much of it, despite picking it up for no reason and buying it, which is my commentary on it. And he comes home and shows today's spoils to his family. Various things that he picked up, and he leaves the photograph just kind of sitting on the counter. And later, Jason finds a note from Danny saying, "Danny know Gracie, friend." So that means that they decide that the next day, the family, I think they leave Lee at home, but Al, Leela, and Jason go to Bonaventure Cemetery to introduce themselves as friends of Danny to the statue of the dead 6-year-old from the late 1800s in this cemetery.
Sure, that all makes sense.
Because Danny said they were friends. And he also like tosses this off with no fucking actual explanation. It's just like one of those cute, fun things. When they get there, there was no tracks around Gracie's statue showing no one had been there that day, but a fresh cut flower was in her hand. Like they insinuate that Danny left a fucking flower with this statue for them to see, or Gracie, the ghost herself, had this flower to meet the family. Like
this all makes
one of those
sense.
two things.
You have a sort of incredulous tone that I'm
that's true.
up and,
this all tracks. So yeah, they go and introduce themselves to the statue. And that evening, when Jason lays down to go to bed as normal, thinking, oh, there's going to be just one ghostly boy up hovering above me, because that's where Danny sleeps now, in the air above Jason, not in the bed that has anything to do with Danny, just randomly. And instead, there's two sets of eyes staring down at Jason that night, one of which is Gracie.
I mean, it's already bad enough. Like, okay, think about all the shit that goes on in bed that's like out of your control. Like, they're going to be watching you when you sleep, and when you wake up, you're going to wake up and you're going to be like fucking farting and stuff. And these ghosts are just going to be watching you. I mean, never mind the fact that like trying to fall asleep with two pairs of eyes just staring at you is already a horrible idea. But yeah, you're just going to like fucking be picking your ass and farting in your sleep and whatever else it is you do, drool all over the place, and they're just watching you do that. It's embarrassing.
Yeah. So Gracie basically then just moves in. Like, they now have two ghost children, two physical, two ghost children, and that's just their life now. And the last like major ghost that I want to mention is named Jill. There's also one that that people will reference in various accountings where they call they reference the Mountain Man. I think that's just someone not using the term Uncle Sam for the Uncle Sam one, because he's kind of described as wearing like frontiersman clothing and stuff. And the things that they attribute to the Mountain Man are basically the things that get attributed to Uncle Sam in the book itself. So if you're going around and wondering why didn't I mention the Mountain Man that you see referenced somewhere, that's why. Anyway, so Jill is another ghost that I don't exactly know how I do know how she ended up there. So Jill was a Victorian woman in her 20s and ended up as a part of this kind of ghostly menagerie that they're building here, because Al brought home a portrait of this woman that they kind of kept under, like behind a bed somewhere or something. Like it seems like they just kind of like, he brings home so much shit. Like they bring home so much shit from these garage sales and yard sales and everything that they just kind of like have all of these like old, like 18th, 19th century portraits around that they're not really like seeing regularly.
Unless you're trying to develop a good reason in your book for why you've been haunted. I don't know why you would want those, but whatever.
Yeah. So Jill was a bit of a socialite. Jill decided that her thing was basically like hosting parties. So she at one point specifically set out, I referenced earlier when they said, when he referenced setting up dinner service for 6, that was Jill's thing. Jill has like basically at one point they claim she sent out invitations to a dinner party to the members of the family here. And then they came down and there was a full 6-person set of like fine china set up perfectly on their table.
What did she make for dinner?
They didn't say what she made then, but there was a point where they first kind of jokingly said that she should help around the house if she was going to stay around. So they came back and in the kitchen there was like, I forget what was on the plates, like sandwiches or something, but with like glasses of lemonade next to them. Like she starts to try to be like a homemaker because they find her like fucking around with a curling iron at one point. She tries to be kind of the hostess of the house. Basically, it seems like Jill wants to be a modern woman in 1998 is the best way I can describe the things they attribute to her.
Uh-huh.
Because she seemed to kind of go towards Leela and mess with her stuff, play with her makeup bag, curling iron, all that kind of stuff. Then there's another time where Jason just like channels the ghost of a 54-year-old man named Walter Greenfield who died in 1948. Or sorry, 85. He died before his 85th birthday. He like literally, when I say channeled, Jason says, I think there's another spirit here. And then Walter Greenfield is the name he gives himself. He just starts talking as Walter Greenfield, recounting, my name is Walter Greenfield. I was born in 1864 and died in 1948, just 2 months and 2 days before my 85th birthday. And like talks about how he died at home in bed of a respiratory illness. Like, so Jason is now literally channeling spirits.
Sure. I mean, yeah, sure. Why not?
And that's like, he then will move on to in late April 1999, talk about these malevolent spirits that started to hang out and would like break shit and have like a non-working printer spit out this message. We are never going to leave, stupids, with 3 exclamation points. And it escalates to the point where one of the spirits starts to has a note hanging from a knife embedded in the wall, and a knife even gets thrown at the back of Jason, and luckily gets caught by a door as Jason was leaving the house. So like it gets violent at the end, but it also gets way less specific at the end, and stops being as like, you just get these vignettes of, oh, all these things happened and that's it. Like you don't get the real day-to-day thing that he has earlier on in the book.
No charming interactions, just general like malevolent poltergeist stuff.
And like it kind of, as far as I can tell, most of this ghostly activity kind of petered out after that. But I didn't find like a specific inciting incident that like made it go away or anything. You know, like they kept like throughout the book talking about how they would pray or have the local church pray to like keep the bad spirits away or whatever. But it just kind of I don't know. I didn't find a good satisfying ending, honestly. Like it basically just after a certain point, they basically just like they got rid of the bed and that's it. And there were these like violent things, and that was I didn't find an ending. You know?
Yeah. Did they identify like what brought the malevolent spirits into the house? Like
the investigators said that like the portal thing, basically enough energy. Okay, so this is where we can talk a little bit about electromagnetism. I looked into this as like a thing that as an excuse for or as a cause for poltergeists. There's this theory by this guy named John Hutchison, who was a self-taught inventor in Canada in the late 70s, early 80s, where he did a bunch of experiments where he filled a room with all these sorts of like Tesla coils, Van de Graaff generators, RF transmitters, all this shit. And as he left them running for a while, these things started to happen that kind of mimicked poltergeist phenomenon. Like objects would levitate into the air and hover. things would move and fall, fires would start randomly around the building, a mirror got smashed at a distance of 80 feet away. Like, this strong electromagnetic field causes all of these things to like occasionally happen in kind of this random way. Now, this is a thing that a lot of scientists have debated, have struck down, have like, this is not a thing that is proven science, but it got brought up when trying to like make any sense of the progression of poltergeist stuff here. Basically, it seems like in the rules of this poltergeist story, the fact that they were interacting with these poltergeists and these spirits allowed them to gather more energy and take stronger control and like have more physical self, I guess, and eventually
manifestation.
Even like physically like possess, fucking channel through a kid at the end. Like, there's this progression over time as the family feeds into it, if you believe the lore of the story. And it led me to just reading about the Hutchison effect thing, which is someone trying to prove poltergeists are an electromagnetic phenomena. And they would reference this and talk about how it's like Jason's like latent psychokinetic abilities got like brought out by Danny, and then he acted as like the collector thing at this wall point that opened a port. Like, it gets fucking weird. Like, it gets weird in the way third acts of like kind of poorly written movies get, you know, where it's like
they don't know how to finish.
We have a bunch of pieces and we don't really know how to bring them together as a satisfying conclusion. So we're just going to say electromagnetism a lot and leave it at that.
Yeah. So this family, like okay. Help me understand. They had the local church pray the bad spirits away.
Yeah.
They also make some suggestions that there is an electromagnetic phenomena that proves these spirits are there.
Well, technically, the paranormal investigators that came to their house put that theory into the world, but yes.
Okay. Sure. So I mean, okay, just generally then it's like a problem with how people interact with the, supposed paranormal phenomena. So here's my thing. And I've talked about this before on the show, but it's like when you start talking about energy and things like that, it's like I could maybe, if you put enough stuff in front of me, be persuaded about electromagnetism causing some shit to go weird sometimes. I could believe that.
Yeah.
When you start talking about like manifesting Uncle Sam bearded men who rampage through your house, you have entered what I can only assume is just a fully spiritual realm. Because one, I think we're kind of operating from this like sci-fi fantasy idea of what energy is. You know, like it's like you're talking about like a fucking magical plasma, really. You're not talking about energy. So it's like I'm saying like pick a side, because you can't convince me of the energy side of things. But if you start saying like, well, these are spirits from, the other realm of the dead or whatever, then I'm like, okay, so we're coming at this from a spiritual angle. I have no horse in that race, but if you believe it, then that's fine. Whatever.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, it gets very nebulous because all of the stuff about the church is just like tossed off as like, when things get bad, it's like, and we had the people from the church pray for us, or we prayed for that the bad stuff would go away, or this would stop. And then it just starts the next chapter. It's almost always at the end of a chapter or section, and then they don't bring it up again. But then also the science stuff is also just tossed off at the end of like all the internet articles where it's like the parapsychologists were came to the conclusion that it was because of electromagnetism in fields.
Yeah.
And it's so everyone is just trying to like make this make sense with their preferred version of belief in a way. And
I guess
it's weird.
What I'm saying just generally about ghost stuff is like, you got to come up with a better angle to pitch.
Yeah.
Than just electromagnetism lets us, see evidence of undead spirits. Like it just, I don't know. It's not
Yeah.
good enough to me.
I mean, the Hutchison thing is basically like it isn't that they're actually spirits. It's just that
Right.
it's just like electrical fields
get
bumping
that. I
against
get
each
that.
other. But it's
I'm saying what the paranormal researchers do. It's like you're basically being told there's this spiritual phenomena, right?
Yeah.
That is like kind of just sublime and has to do with a lot of assumptions about life after death and all this stuff, and honestly probably the existence of God and heaven and all this stuff. And you just are like, well, we can measure that.
Yeah.
We can measure God's perfect angels with electromagnetism readings or whatever. It's like, I don't know. I don't. That's just so stupid.
It's
it's ridiculous.
It is ridiculous. I kind of feel the same way about this one. I think the story's fun and like I would almost recommend reading the book because the book is highly entertaining in the fact that it just like presents the most like ridiculous shit you've ever heard with a straight face.
No disrespect to ghost enjoyers. I just really have a problem with how we explain the phenomena. And I kind of feel like we need to reassess, like we need to come up with a new option for how we explain the phenomena.
Yeah.
That makes a little more sense. So that's all.
Oh, there's one. Okay. I'll end the episode on this. What happened to the bed? So
yeah,
when they initially sold the bed, it went to an auction house. He had bought it for $16 and they thought that if they disassembled the bed, the hold over Danny or whatever would be like broken or whatever. And I guess that worked because Danny stayed around and the bed left. So they sold it to a family for $500 because at this time the article had come out. So the bed had kind of gained some local infamy. And the person who bought it then returned it a couple days later. And because the reputation caused a lot of people to flock to their antique store where this bed was being held, and it basically got too much attention and not enough business for them, while also the security system started to go off in the middle of the night, and it annoyed. Basically, they started to have so many false alarm security system calls that it annoyed them enough they sent the bed back.
Wow.
And then after that, a lady and her daughter bought the bed and gave it its own room in their garage, which they called Danny's room, despite the fact that, as far as I can tell, the bed isn't linked. Like Danny stayed around with I don't know. This detail that they call it Danny's room, and when you enter it, it supposedly feels cold and damp, and no one lays down on the bed or anything. Yeah, exactly. No one lays in the bed to this day or whatever. I don't know why. Basically, I don't know what the fuck happened with Danny. Like, if Danny stayed around this house, why is the bed still weird? And if he's stuck with the bed, why did he stare? Like, it just it doesn't track with me.
Yeah.
So no. I think it also then went on auction again in like 2016, and that was the last I heard of it. So.
Okay. That is, I can't believe I've never heard that story before. It is, I feel like we're running out of stories where people say a bunch of crazy shit happened in a ghost type situation. I feel like we've covered a lot of those.
Yeah, I think
we have. I mean, they're probably not all, we haven't wrung it totally dry, but there's only so many times that you can say, yeah, we fucking summoned 4 ghosts in our house and they fucking wrote messages and shit on the walls and cleaned up our lunches or whatever.
Yeah. Look, I would think that too. But I continue to be surprised by the depths of mankind's imagination. So
it's pretty incredible.
On that note, let's jump into a big question.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, Kyle. So because I went long, we're gonna do a short one today. If you were a poltergeist and you had to be locked into one kind of totemic item for all of eternity, what item do you want to have your spirit linked to?
Well, I have some pretty highly posable figurines.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm gonna say, like, it's sort of like we're operating on a couple layers here. I could, like, haunt one of my Evangelion unit figures.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so one, it's sort of like a funny joke, like, haha, a soul is the power behind this.
Yeah, it fits the canon.
Thing. Yeah, exactly. But also, if you're a ghost and you can exert this energy, sort of in this, quote unquote energy, I sort of feel like if you haunted a toy that had good points of articulation, you could just kind of walk around, right?
See,
like,
that's the thing that no ghost story has truly grappled with, is the level of posability in figures these days, and if ghosts can haunt and or interact with them.
Yeah, so I'm going to take my most highly posable Evangelion unit, which looking back there, I want to say,
what has the most points of articulation?
Honestly, it's not the Evangelion unit. It's the Hygog from Gundam.
Okay.
So maybe I'll fucking be a little like amphibious Gundam suit that's walking around.
Yeah.
So that thing I think actually is the most articulate thing in my so yeah, I'm thinking that. Also, it occurred to me that, like, we went this entire episode without making a Danny Phantom joke.
Yeah, we did.
And I don't know how we did that. And I just wanted to say it.
I don't think about Danny Phantom. Like, I never watched it, neither. So I don't. It's not like a poll that I make regularly.
I did watch it. So
yeah. We've been over this. I thought I was too cool for cartoons, like way too young of an age. And I thought I was watching. I wanted to watch the fucking Cosby Show on Nick at Night instead. Like, I was a weird child.
You thought you were too cool for cartoons when you were too young. And I thought I was still age appropriate when I was too old for cartoons. So there we go. But so,
yeah, I honestly, I like the idea of the superposable, but there's part of me that, like, wants to just possess, like, a book, so that most of the time no one does anything, and then when someone, like, picks me up, I can just, like, fuck with them, like, really fucking, like, scare the crap out of somebody. You
want to, like, elaborate on, like, what kinds of shit you get up to as a book?
I mean, like, all the classics, like Snap Shut on their fingers, Scream when they open certain pages. Yeah, give them a paper cut. Like, make it so pages stick together, and when they go to, like, show it to somebody, then they go, like, fully freely.
Bookmark pages that, like, have, like, that, like, are point, like, how you can dog ear them. You'll, like, dog ear them onto, like, to point to certain words that, like, spell out a sentence or something.
Yeah, and I will move their bookmarks around. They will never know where the fuck they are in this book.
And so here's my question: is if you possess that book as a spirit, do you get to read it?
That's the thing. Can you read? Can I read as a spirit? Obviously, I guess Danny could. So in the canon of this universe, you can read.
Yeah. Hell, I'm not going to have enough time to read all my books in my waking life, so I might as well do it when I'm dead,
Yeah, there you go. So yeah, my thickest book at time of death, I'll haunt that, and then I'll be able to power through that one on death,
Cool, yeah. So that's crazy. You're going to be haunting a copy of the Bible. Cool. Love that. That's a good idea.
Yeah.
Well,
so
Nile,
business?
Yeah, let's take care of some business.
All right. So if you want to follow us on social media, we're on Twitter at IGW Podcast.
You can follow us on Facebook.com/ItGetsWeirdPodcast.
And we're on all your favorite podcatchers, from Google Play to Apple Podcasts to Spotify. If you listen to podcasts somewhere, look up It Gets Weird, and we're almost certainly there.
Twitch.tv/ItGetsWeird. When we start streaming again, it's going to be on there. So go ahead and check out our Twitch channel. If you want us to read an email on the show, go ahead and email us. It sustains us, one.
Mm-hmm.
Two, we got to make sure Jacob can't just, fire off a series of emails and get in there and make a whole thing of it. You know what I'm saying? We got to get in there. We got to disrupt the Jacob flood, is what I'm calling it.
I want to put forth less of a thing where we're, like, attacking one of our listeners for one.
I'm not attacking. I mean, I'm not attacking Jacob. Let's be clear. Jacob, if you're listening to this, I'm not attacking you. It's just, like, funny to sound like I am. You know?
Yeah, exactly.
So patreon.com/itgetsweird. We have a $2 tier and a $5 tier. At the $2 tier, you get access to It Gets Weird TV right now. Nile and I are watching X-Files season 2. And you get to vote on what weird show we watch on this show. Yeah, I said it, Niall. I saw that laugh.
I
said
heard
weird.
it every time you said the word show.
So
it wasn't a weirdly large number of times at all.
So yeah, $2 tier. We also have a $5 tier where you get another bonus show on the off weeks of It Gets Weird TV. So sometimes that's me, sometimes that's Niall. All kinds of stuff on there. Sometimes we watch a movie. Whether you donate to the $2 tier or the $5 tier, you get access to the main show 2 days early on Friday instead of Sunday. And you get access to the Discord where we're hanging out, talking about all kinds of stuff like making fun of me for not knowing it was Moshi Moshi instead of Mushi Mushi. So if you ever wanted to do that kind of shit, check it out. So yeah, you get early access, Discord access. It's great. Please donate. We would really appreciate it. We also have a $1 tier, which you don't get anything out of it. You're just saying, hey, here's $1. Thanks for doing what you do. Here's a tip. If you can't donate, please tell your friends, tell your enemies, tell your congressman all about It Gets Weird podcast.
All right. Thank you all for listening. This has been It Gets Weird, and I've been Niall.
And I'm Kyle, signing out.
Peace.